Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Starting Out Solitary. Blind Rob here. This is week 264, I believe. And I'm covering in for Corvus yet again, as I've been doing for a good while now, ever since the quarantine with Corona hit. And I apologize that this video and the other two videos that I will be uploading in the same night that I upload this one are super late. Excuse me. As I've stated before, I've been dealing with a lot of stuff, a combination of my health, family health, technical problems, repairs that need to be done. Basically, everything that can go wrong, to some extent, has gone wrong. I mean, it's not as bad as what it could be. I mean, we're all doing okay. It's nothing that bad, but it's more a hindrance than anything else. And at this point in my life, I got maybe 1 or 2 times a week that I have like a small window that I am able to record videos. And sometimes things happen and I'm just not able to record videos when I should be able to or when I want to. So I just, I know I've said this before, but just in case anyone's irritated with me, be it, my fellow host slash co-host slash sub-hosts or viewers for that matter, let me reiterate myself by, repeat myself in the fact that, I did not mean for this to happen. It just happens. I'm trying to get back to what I originally planned on doing, which is, either doing them one time or like recording more than one video and then, in advance and uploading when I get to. Sometimes I can get that done. A lot of times I'm not able to though. Okay, so that out of the way, this is week 264. Unfortunately, we are talking about a subject that I find very controversial, that I have a lot of heavy opinions about. I am very opinionated about this topic more so than others. This is like the 20th or 21st take that I've tried doing with this video. Hopefully I can get this all the way through to a point where I feel that I can hit the stop button, feel good about it, and upload it. So just keep that in mind, that I'm strongly opinionated about shamanism, which is the topic of this week. And my video might inadvertently offend people. I don't mean to. It's not my intention. But please just keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm going to be upfront with you all. I am not a shaman. I do not consider myself a shaman. Although there have been several times throughout my life, several times here in the past couple of months actually, where I have been mistaken for shaman because a lot of what I do as a spirit worker, specifically as a fairy worker, but in 2 of the traditions that I practice that I'm a part of, I work with spirit beings, otherworldly beings, and so I get mistaken for a shaman pretty often. In fact, a good portion of my practice could be described as shamanic by a lot of people. I do not identify either. I do not identify as shaman. I do not identify my practice as shamanism, and I do not identify my practice as being shamanic in nature. It is a term that I'm not a fan of. I'm not fond of. I want to have nothing to do with. In fact, I avoid it like it's the Black Plague. And the reason for that is because I believe that the term, how it's used in modern culture, especially modern spiritual culture, is highly appropriate, highly appropriated. That I can't even speak. It's been highly appropriated, taken out of context, and I just don't like it. And I say that because I know for a fact that there are a lot of people who practice various forms of Norse magic, Satyr being one of them, where they use the term that they are a Norse shaman. In fact, there are a lot of people in Rurkertrue, the form of Norse heathenry that I practice, who identify as shamans. I am not them. honestly, I'm very much a beginner when it comes to Seder, but when I get to the point where I feel like, my community feels like, and the beings I work with feel like that I am able and allowed to take on one of the terms that refers to practitioner Seder, I will be sticking with Seder as opposed to shaman. Same with Irish spirituality. I tend to stick with words like bard and fili. And I'm of the opinion that different traditions should more or less, stick with the terms that are attached to their tradition's equivalent. And and of course, that in of itself is kind of problematic. Okay, so first of all, I am aware that there are actual shamans. There is the practice where the word actually comes from, like the culture that it originally comes from. I don't practice anything that is remotely connected to that particular culture. That's the main reason why I avoid that term like the plague, because I think that there's so many people who use that term who have a practice that has nothing even connected to it. Of course, or to the cultures that are that were in the Siberian region. Of course, there have been other indigenous tribes who have adopted the term shaman and the term shamanism as an easy catchphrase, as an easy term to describe what they're doing, even if it's not quite on the mark, if it's not quite bullseye. It works well enough. It's similar enough. I'm also and I don't have a problem with indigenous people using the term shaman. I don't have a problem with the people who are of the original culture that the term shaman and shamanism comes from. I respect the fact that that they have a right to use that term to call their practice that. I don't practice either any form of Siberian spirituality or any indigenous spirituality. Excuse me, any of the ones that have been using the term shaman for a good long while now. That is in a nutshell why I avoid the term like the plague. Another main reason why I avoid it like the plague is because of the fact that okay, so the term is used in academia, and I am very not happy about that, because just because it's used in academia doesn't mean that it's used right or that it should be used, for one thing. And you hear so many people say, well, all these cultures had shaman practices. Depends on who you talk to. I'm of the opinion that they don't so much have shaman practices. They have practices that are to commune with the otherworld and with otherworldly beings to bring balance and healing to their physical community of people, be it their tribe, be it their village, be it whatever, as well as the community of spirits and otherworldly beings that they are attached to, that they've been claimed by, that they have been so on and so forth. And so I personally think it's a disservice to basically just go around and lumping every practice as as shaman. Of course, I also realize that there are people in today's practices, like in today's general community, who like the nature of their practice and how they came about it, how they came to it, is so close to the things that we know about actual shamanism, that to them the best term for them to use is shaman. And it might even be that the spirits that they're working with are actually wanting them to use the term shaman, to identify as such. I don't have an answer for that. That's up to them. I think just like with a lot of other terms of identification, at the end of the day, you got to decide for yourself what you are and what is appropriate for you. I'm not going to judge someone, especially if I don't know all the details of their personal story, their personal practice, and their personal reasoning for wanting to identify as shaman. All I know is that's something that I refuse to do, and every time that I get called a shaman, which is kind of often, and I will deny it, and I will say no. I'm actually something else. So, since I'm not a shaman, I really can't talk about shamanism. What I can talk about is the fact that what we know about shamanism and what we know about other practices that have some aspects that are pretty similar to shamanism that commonly gets lumped in with shamanism is that they do, in fact, have a couple of things. They do have some things in common. For example, at the very heart of the practice, it is community. It is being part of a community, a physical community, a spiritual community, and being a bridge of balance, of well-being, of health, of healing, of order between this world and the other world. There are different ways of being initiated into the practice, but usually, at least a lot of the ones that I've come across, that I've seen, and my particular tradition as well, you're usually grabbed or claimed or kidnapped or whatever by, the particular spirits. I know that in the traditional original culture that shamanism comes from, there's this thing where the spirits will, call to you, they will claim you as a shaman, and especially if you try to resist or deny it, you will end up being sick, or bad things will happen to you until you get through it, and you will continue to get sick and continue to have problems until you do so. As far as my tradition goes, as far as Irish spirituality goes, and it's not specifically a Fideoc thing, because something interesting about Irish spirituality is that while there are terms for a lot of things, there are some things that were just never quite codified. To give you an example, there is a tradition of animal spirits in Irish spirituality, but there's no, at least not that I've found one, there's no actual word in Irish that at least I've found that calls them as such. It's, and like the pieces of lore are not 100% codified. But as far as the fairy faith goes, being, a fairy worker, a fairy doctor, or insert some of the other terms that may apply, to get into the practice in some of the sort of spiritual vocations, you need to have a fairy companion. Usually it comes in the form of a fairy lover. Doesn't always have to be. But you have to be taught by the fairy folk. They have to teach you the ways of doing it. To some extent, on some level. And I have been practicing, my form of it that involves fairy folk for past year and a half now, give or take. Yeah, something like that. Almost 2 years. And I am still very much a beginner as far as that goes. But thankfully, I've had some, great companions that have had my back and has kept me straight and has kept me balanced, especially throughout my personal ordeals, my personal journeys, my personal struggles. But each tradition, each practice that is very much being in communion with spirits, with otherworldly beings, it's going to have different things. As a lot of these practices gets lumped into the term shamanism, there will be people who will hate the fact that not all traditions have exactly the same things, and will do their best to fill in the blanks or to polish things a little bit. Okay, so to explain what I mean. A common thing that you hear in traditional shamanism, I honestly don't know if it is actually part of traditional shamanism, but you see the concept of the three worlds: upper world, middle world, and underworld. Looking back to Irish spirituality, since that's again as an example, as it is my primary form of spirituality, it's not as cut and dry as that. Okay, so you see, the other world is more beside this world, or kind of beside or even diagonal to this world to some extent. It overlaps to some extent. And that there are several places in the other, several blessed islands. Some act as homes to the gods. Some act as realms of the dead. And then, of course, you have Dawn's home. Dawn being the ancestor god of the dead in Irish spirituality, which the physical area of his home is a small, tiny island off the coast of Ireland, southwest Ireland, if I remember correctly. So you don't really have a cut and dry upper world, middle world, underworld. I mean, the Isles, the Blessed Isles, are either seen as being to the west of Ireland, or you would have to go across the waves, go across the ninth wave, or you would have to find a ferry mound, a she, and you would have to go through it. So it's not like exactly cut and dry. And while each island is individual, they all are sort of subdomains, subterritories within an overarching otherworld. So you don't really have the cut and dry traditional thing that you see in other traditions. But you will see a lot of people who call themselves Celtic shamans who try to force the three world the three world model into it. It doesn't quite work that way. I don't really have any comment on it because I'm not a Celtic quote unquote Celtic shaman. Obviously, I'm a fairy worker, I'm a spirit worker, I'm a bard, and I'm a fledgling fili. But it's all about healing. It's all about healing the spirit, healing your community, especially when they're out of balance with this world and the other world, with helping the soul when the spirit gets out of whack, when people have offended otherworldly beings and they need to get right with them, to be in balance with them. And also, it's these various, to some extent, being called to, being claimed, being touched by these otherworldly beings. It's very much something that you don't, at least from a lot of the common traditions that I've come across that are either shamanism or get lumped into shamanism, regardless of the fact. It's not something that you can choose to become, though I have heard that there are a couple that you can. But it's something that these beings, they choose you. And what happens after that depends on whether or not you welcome it, and what ordeals, what trials you have to face. In some ways, it's sickness. For me, it was one of the craziest spiritual experiences of my life that I thought had only it felt like it only took an hour, like half an hour to an hour, but 6 or 7 hours went by, and I had lost track of time. And what started out as midday ended up being sunset. All of a sudden, it was really weird. And even after these almost 2 years, I still don't know how to describe it. I still don't know how to put it, into perspective to properly describe it with words. Unfortunately, but each ordeal is going to be personal to the tradition, to the culture that's tied to the beings that are involved, to the person. And of course, not everyone who goes through those, are, authentically called. In a lot of these traditions, like another possibility is mental illness, and being able to discern whether or not someone is actually going through one of these experiences, going through one of these ordeals, becoming one of these kinds of people, as opposed to being, mentally ill. That takes a lot of discernment, that takes a lot of experience, and it can be a bit of a mess. But in essence, it's very much, it's a part of you. It's a part of you that is acknowledged, that it is a part of your spirit, part of your body, deep down to every pore, every fiber, every cell, within and without of you. And it is something that once you've been called by your companions, your beings, your guides, your guardians, it is a lifelong thing that you can never truly walk away from or get away from. To try to do so is pretty much trying to go without air, or to go without water, or to go without sleep for the rest of your life. I don't know. Like I said, it's not my intention to offend anyone. I could go on and on for hours about this topic. It's, like I said, it's a topic, a piece of conversation that I find very controversial. I have a lot of heavy opinions about it, opinions that are controversial in of themselves. But just some of my thoughts, my feelings, my opinions on a heartbeat. Until next time, until I can talk to y'all again with another topic, may Breach bless. Take care.